Bismillahi wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My dear brothers and sisters, today in this very short halaqah, I wanted to talk about something that we often find ourselves struggling with. And it's something that the best of all people, the prophets themselves, actually went through. And Allah says in Surah Al-Ankabut, أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون ولقد فتنا الذين من قبلهم فلا يعلمن الله الذي صدقوا ولا يعلمن الكاذبين. Do people think that once they say we believe that they will be left without being put to the test? We certainly tested those who came before you, and in this way Allah clearly distinguishes those who are truthful from the liars. So we obviously know that this life is nothing but a test. And this life will throw so many problems at us and difficulties, but also it will throw blessings and times of ease at us. And from the story of the Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam, we can know how to navigate both of these times of blessings and ease, as well as the very difficult times that we will for sure endure. Now, to kind of talk about who the Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam was. He was a prophet that was sent amongst the descendants of Ishaq alayhi salam, whose father was Ibrahim alayhi salam. And in his life, he was blessed with many of the typical blessings that Allah bestows upon whomsoever He wishes. The first was that he was considered a good-looking man, and he was given excellent health for most of his life. And he was also given a lot of money, so he had power, he had a community, he was a community leader, he was respected. And among the most important blessings that he had, which we'll see in his story, is his righteous wife, who stuck with him through thick and thin, through both the times of difficulty as well as the times of ease. And from this wife, he also had many children as well. And as I mentioned before, he was a prophet at the end of the day, and people actually accepted him and respected him as a community leader, which was a blessing. And in these times of blessings, Ayyub devoted himself to Allah. He was praised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a perfect worshipper, as a very devout worshipper. However, as with the sunnah of Allah, He will test every single one of His righteous slaves, and Ayyub alayhi salam is no exception. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began to then test Ayyub with trials and tribulations, we have to ask ourselves, how did Ayyub navigate these? And before we go to that, we're going to talk about what the trials and tribulation of Ayyub alayhi salam was. Number one, he was given wealth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away his wealth. Number two, he was given family and children, and he took away his family and his children. And number three, he also lost his wealth. And Ibn Kathir mentions that the sickness of Ayyub alayhi salam was so severe that there was not a single place on his body, both internal and external, that was not afflicted with some type of sickness. From the interior, he had problems with his organs and the typical how we have difficulties in bodily processes and stuff like that. And then on the outside, it was more of a skin disease, right? There would be pus and sores, and literally he became unsightly to look at. And it was even narrated that there was always a foul smell that was coming from him as well. And because of his sickness, his society, his community began to actually ostracize him. And this added to the trials and tribulations that Ayyub alayhi salam went to. And because of this ostracization, he was forced to live on the outskirts of his society. He was basically expelled from the community because they thought it was contagious sickness. And the only person that stuck with him was his wife. And she stuck with him through thick and thin, through both the times of difficulty as well as the times of ease. And because Ayyub alayhi salam was so sick, he could not go out and provide work and provide for the family. So his wife was forced to go and buy and sell whatever she could. She would try to gather whatever she could, try to sell those things. But because they were so impoverished, they had literally nothing. She became so desperate that she ran out of things to sell. So in her desperation, she took a lock of her own hair and sold that. And at this, when Ayyub alayhi salam's heart just broke, right? Because as men, it's one thing if we are going through the trials and tribulations ourselves, right? But when we see close family members, when we see our mothers, when we see our fathers, when we see our siblings, our spouses, our children, when we see them going through difficult times as well, it becomes more burdensome on our own selves. And it's at this point that he calls out to his Lord, right? He's at his lowest point and he calls out, and in the Quran he says, and it says in Surah Anbiya, and remember when Ayyub cried out to his Lord, I have been touched with adversity, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. And this is a very beautiful thing, right? Because Ayyub alayhi salam did not ask Allah to alleviate his hardships. Rather, he turned to Allah and said, you know the state of my affairs, you know the pain and the suffering that I am going through right now, and you are the most merciful, right? And this is a very beautiful way of making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Ayyub presented his situation to Ayyub as a form of dua. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the situation that you and I, and any time we go through trials and tribulations, He knows how difficult it is upon each and every single one of us, for He is the all-seeing and the all-hearing, right? So Ayyub says, you know the state of my affairs. Oh Allah, I leave it to you. You are the most merciful, right? He is in complete submission, even at his lowest point. He is fully submitted to the will of Allah. He did not complain about his situation, about his trials and hardships to Allah once. Rather, in a very polite and sweet manner, he made dua. You see the affliction I have been suffering with. Oh Allah, rectify it, and you are the most merciful, right? And to show how he navigated these times of difficulties as well, his wife asked him after some years of enduring the hardship, she says to him, for how long is our suffering going to last? You are a prophet of Allah. You are honored, so ask Allah to alleviate these hardships from us. And he responds to her with, how long has Allah blessed us with goodness? She replies, 40, 80 years. And then he responds, and how many years have we experienced this hardship? And she replies, only 7 years. And then he responds with a very beautiful manner. He says, then how can you complain about the suffering for a short time when He has already given us 80 years of goodness? And now after Ayyub made this dua, he had endured and had fortitude and perseverance and sabr to endure this hardship. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of his affair. In Surah Sad, verse 42, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides the means and the medicine for his illness. It says, we responded, so stomp your foot. Now here is a cool and refreshing spring for washing and drinking. So it's a miraculous spring that springs forth, for which Ayyub washed his body with, and it completely healed the sickness. He basically became rejuvenated as a new man. And the next verse immediately then says, and we gave him back his family, twice as many, and as a mercy from us, and a lesson for the people of the reason. And this is the biggest lesson that we can take from the Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam. And that is that we will be tested in this life with both times of blessings as well as times of difficulties. For Allah says in Surah Fajr, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانَنِ. Now whenever a human being is tested by their Lord through His generosity and blessings, they boast, my Lord has deservedly honored me. But when He tests them by limiting their provision, they protest by saying, my Lord has undoubtedly humiliated me. So rather than going in times of blessings and saying, Allah loves me, Allah has chosen me for these blessings, Allah is testing you with these blessings. And at the same time, during times of difficulties, He is also choosing you to show whether you will be patient or not. And from the story of Ayyub, we see that during times of blessings, we have to show thankfulness and shukr to make sure that we appreciate the blessings and the times of ease that we have, as well as during the times of difficulties, we show sabr and patience, because Allah, if we are sincere towards Him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will completely rectify and take care of any of our affairs. I ask Allah to make us amongst the patient when we are going through difficulties, and I ask Allah to make us amongst the thankful when we are going through times of ease. And I ask Allah to make it easy for all the Muslims around the world that are going through difficult situations right now. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.